Hello, good morning, good evening, good day, good afternoon, and aloha. Welcome back to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFO. My name's Luis Jimenez. We've got a really fun and killer show for you today. Sorry for the music. Something happened with my file here, so we're getting the music on now. Oh, there we go. I had a really cool intro because we've got a really cool guest. So check this out, and then we're going to introduce him and bring on the rest of the crew.
What I saw was a metallic object that appeared to be about 30 feet in diameter and was probably about 15 feet tall at its highest point, disc-shaped. No sound to the object at all, although we did have considerable...
I don't know what's happening here today, you guys. We're having technical difficulties, but hey, that's sometimes that happens.
Radio and the state radio were completely out. It hovered in our area for probably about 3 minutes, and suddenly it rose up, turned over on edge, and the only thing I could see at that point then were three knob-like structures that were sticking out from the underside of the object. The object started spinning very rapidly, and as it spun, it started lifting up in the air and picked up speed, and all of a sudden, just with a real sharp burst of speed, shot straight up in the air and was gone in a matter of seconds.
All right. So there we go. We got our music. We got our intro. I totally messed that up, you guys. I apologize. But thank you for being patient with us here. So before we get started, of course, we got some bills to pay. Welcome to the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Again, my name's Luis Jimenez. Don't forget that this show will be available on podcast, iTunes, Spotify. We've got a Patreon, so check that out if you want to support the show. There are no paywalls. The Patreon is there just because you love the show. Same thing with Super Chats. If you got a dying question for our guests, please do us a favor. Slam it in the super chat. We'll make sure to get to it. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell just in case we do change times on shows. Sometimes guests are overseas, and so we've got to change the time of the show. So that will warn you anytime that does happen, and you won't miss any of the action here. Of course, we've got a merch store. All of the links for every guest and all of the co-hosts are down below in the description. Thank you to the KGRA Broadcasting family for putting this show on the radio. Man, what a hiccup. Sorry if you're listening live. Things like that happen in the show, but we got to go with the flow. And today is going to be a really fun show. This is a guest that I've been dying to talk to since I basically started the show. One of my inspirations, one of the shoulders of the giants that we stand on in the UAP topic. Without this man's work, we are not here. Period, full stop. So before we bring him on, I want to introduce my co-host for the day, Mr. Ratherby Squidding and Mr. Jazz Shaw. Gentlemen, welcome to the show again. How you doing?
Doing well.
Doing very well, thank you.
Excellent. A little bit of a hiccup there with the video file, huh, Rather?
Yeah, we'll get through it. That's going to be an exciting
show. That was the first time
show.
in a long time that the intro of the show. Man, I had it so cool. I had the cut from Lee Spiegel's record, UFOs and the credibility factor lined up and melded with our music, but I totally goofed it.
I know I'm embarrassed because I've never seen this happen ever before in 30 years of broadcast. It's like a first.
It's like a first for you.
Really?
I can't taste the sarcasm, Jazz.
It's all uphill from here, though.
It's all uphill from
That's
here.
the point. You start at the bottom, you're
Yeah.
only going up.
Exactly. You're only going to go up. And also, we love to embrace the mistakes here. When we make mistakes, we make fun of them because, hell, what else are you going to do? All right. So, gentlemen, today is going to be a really phenomenal day. I also sent Lee Speigel the wrong link for this show. So, Bill was calling him on the line. He's like, I only got the link that I got. I was like, I don't know how I sent the wrong link, but everything's figured out. We have, again, a gentleman that I have been dying to talk to. His name is Lee Speigel. He's presented credible, compelling UFO stories, science, and the paranormal since 1975, when he produced and wrote a documentary record album, UFOs and the Credibility Factor, that clip that you heard at the top of the show. And we've got a couple more clips that we're going to play for you guys. For CBS, this marked the first time that a major record company offered a UFO-related product to the public via primetime TV infomercial. He was also co-producer and co-writer of James Fox's great film, The Phenomenon, a thought-provoking and critically acclaimed 2020 documentary about UFOs. Lee Spiegel's also the producer and host of the resurrected version of his previous NBC radio talk show, The Edge of Reality. The original, which originally aired from 1982 to 1986. The current program, The Edge of Reality Radio, is broadcast over KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. So without further ado, Mr. Lee Speigel. Sir, how are you?
Testing 1, 2, 3. Can anybody hear me?
You sound wonderful, Lee. You sound wonderful. And I apologize for sending you the wrong link.
You know, don't you ever do that again.
After all of the wonderful conversations that I had, I'm like, oh, we're a professional show. We have a lot of fun. And
I've been dying to say to you, we meet again, Mr. Jimenez.
Again, you sound like a Bond villain. I love it. Absolutely love it. Okay, well, Mr. Speigel, thank you so much for the time.
No.
Okay.
Mr. Speigel was my father.
Okay, fair. Lee.
You can call me Lee. My good friends call me Speigel. And occasionally, if I'm walking on a street in New York and somebody whistles, I may turn around.
Yeah.
But go with Lee.
I'm assuming even to this day you get a few whistles. I bet you get some cat calls too, huh?
Oh yeah, and they're from cats.
Okay, so Lee, and I'm gonna hopefully work my one day up to just calling you Speigel because I love that. So Lee, man, I have a really hard decision to make here because I don't know where to start with you. Because you sent me so much information and I shared it here with the boys. And Jazz, thank you so much for covering for Mike here. Mike was in Mexico and Jazz hopped in last minute, and I sent him your Air Force training manual, and he's like, I'm going to try and get this in. So I know he looked over it, but he is also familiar with your work. But this is going to be sort of a history lesson for the first hour, and then the second hour we're going to jump into current events and what Lee Speigel thinks on some of the current events that's happening right now. So I guess let's start, or is there a particular place you'd like to start, Lee? Let's do it that way.
Yeah, let me first say hello to Rather and Jazz. Hi, guys.
Hey, Lee. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you guys, too. Thank you.
Been following the HuffPo for a long time, and we probably come in some areas from opposite sides of the aisle, but, we cover a lot of the same stuff. So.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised that I lasted there for 7 years, which it was a good gig because I was hired to come there by my good friend Buck Wolf, who was one of the editors there, and Buck and I go back way back to our days when we were at ABC together, and he brought me into HuffPost, and I ended up spending 7 years as the chief writer and editor of UFO stories, paranormal, all things paranormal, and with a dash of science thrown into these things. And it was just a lot of fun to be there. Going to that newsroom every day for 7 years was like, if you can imagine, the Daily Planet, okay, or the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, the Washington Post, any major big newsroom. It was amazing to be there. And while everybody else around me was doing stuff about entertainment and politics, I was into the bizarre. So how could I not like that gig? It was great.
It sounds like a fun time.
It was.
So Lee, do you want to start at the, I guess your record, or do you
Sure.
want to go a little earlier than that?
Well, the record was actually finished and ready for the public at the end of 1975. But what led to that was that in 1973, my attention was caught by a few UFO sightings reports that took place. There was a big wave of sightings in the United States in 1973, specifically in October of that year. And there were two sightings or reports or stories that really got to me, and they only were a week apart. In October, one was, and I'm sure you guys have heard about this, from Pascagoula, Mississippi. About two men were fishing off the Pascagoula Pier, the river. Charlie Hickson, Calvin Parker, and the story goes that they were abducted, so they claim, by something that came out of the sky, whisked them away somewhere, brought them into some location, and did some physical exams on them, and eventually let them go. What makes the story kind of credible is that there were eyewitnesses on the ground and in other places that actually saw this UFO coming out of the sky. The same week, an Army helicopter over Ohio, a 4-man crew commanded by Lieutenant Colonel, and he became Lieutenant Colonel, but at the time he was Captain Larry Coyne. He was at the controls of the helicopter, and they all saw something was coming at them from the horizon, and at first they thought it was a radio tower beacon, and so they didn't really think much more of it until it kept getting closer and closer, and they all realized this is on a collision course with us. We either have to get higher or get as close to the ground as possible, but they couldn't do either. The thing was upon them so fast, and all they could do was to brace for impact. And
I was going to say, you know what's funny, Lee, is I have that clip from the album queued up, and we could hear it from them directly.
It was, you could hear Larry Coyne talking exactly what happened. I'm not sure what part of the clip you have, but I would say go ahead and hit it, and it'll be easy to jump right into it.
Yeah, let's do it. All right, queuing it up right now. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
For all these years, and we've been so dumb as to not realize it.
October 18, 1973. A terrifying encounter takes place between a 4-man crew aboard an Army helicopter and a UFO, while the crew is en route to Cleveland, Ohio from Columbus. This mid-air drama is witnessed by several ground observers and is considered to be one of the most impressive sightings in history. The commander of the helicopter, Major Larry Coyne, and his crew thought at first that the light on the horizon was a radio tower beacon.
The crew chief on the helicopter observed a light, a red light, on the east horizon. He then informed me that the light was closing on the helicopter, that it was coming at us on a collision course. And I looked to the right, and I observed that the object became bigger and the light became brighter. And I began to descend the helicopter towards the ground to get out of the collision course path. And this object continued to come directly at the aircraft. It was like a missile locked onto the helicopter. It looked like we were going to collide with it, and we braced for impact. Then I heard the crewman in the back say, "Look up," and I did, and I observed this craft stop directly in front of us. It was hovering right over the helicopter. We assumed it was a high-performance fighter, but when it stopped directly in front of us, all 4 of us realized that was no high-performance aircraft. This craft, from the angle that we saw it, was cigar-shaped.
These 4 men are trained military personnel with thousands of hours of flying time behind them. What occurred next might seem like science fiction.
And so that's the clip. And what I absolutely love about this is that the year that this was produced, the time, the music, the editing, the narration, it feels so gritty and from that era. And I absolutely loved it. I think when I talked to you about this, I was like, it reminds me of Linda Moulton Howe's film that she made, Strange Harvest, and it also reminded me of Leonard Nimoy's In Search Of. And I love this stuff, but that's right from the mouth of the Major, correct?
Well, yeah, and I wrote the script, but I didn't write his words.
Right.
And he, and then the thing that's coming up, I don't know if you still have it queued up, but he talks about the most dramatic part of the encounter when they thought they were going to hit this thing and it was going to be curtains for them. Do you have that right there, Luis?
Should I continue playing it? It's the next part of it, correct?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, let's do it.
But it happened.
We were 1,700 feet. At this time, I was worried we were going to hit the ground. And I looked at my altimeter, and our helicopter was 3,500 feet, climbing 1,000 feet a minute with no changes in the control. We went from 1,700 feet to 3,500 feet in a matter of seconds and never knew it. And there was a bump, like turbulence, at which time we had control of the aircraft again, and then we continued on to Cleveland. to encounter a UFO. When it does approach the aircraft, you have no idea what it is. Well, I think if it wanted to collide with us, it could have. But you can't get away from it. You don't have that much time to respond.
Done.
I love that music.
we hired a New York City musician named Patrick Adams, and we said we want some original music for the background of this album. And he said, well, tell me what the album's about. And I said, well, okay, UFOs, paranormal, basically, weird crap going on that needs weird music. And he came up with a lot of different selections for us to choose from. And I used them throughout the record because I knew that I wanted to have certain kinds of music under the astronauts, other kinds of music. We have 2 abduction cases that are on the record album. And we just wanted to make sure that the music fit what was being said. And it worked.
Oh, it does. It works. It works beautifully. Real quick, NordoStream with a $10 donation. Thank you so much for the super sticker. Truly appreciate it. But I was going to open it up to Rather and Jazz. Did you guys have any comments on what we just heard?
Go ahead, Rather.
Well, yeah, I found it's a very fascinating story. I guess kind of a question that I have is the 70s. I guess the 70s through 2017 seemed like a weird time in government UFO history. After the Condon report of '69, kind of the government investigation stopped down. So, these like 1973 cases, do you get any sense that they were actually investigated by the military, or is it pretty much just the story that we have?
Well, here's the thing, Rather, and I don't mind saying this because damn it, it's true. When the Air Force stopped investigating UFOs, I say that with tongue in cheek because they never stopped investigating UFOs. But when they closed Project Blue Book in 1969, after investigating it for a couple of decades, and in fact, their main scientific consultant to Project Blue Book was the astronomer J. Allen Hynek. And every time that there was a UFO flap or wave somewhere in the country that they couldn't easily explain away as the lenticular clouds or even swamp gas or the planet Venus or regular unconventional or regular conventional aircraft, they would always call in Dr. Hynek and say, sweep it under the rug. We're going to hold a press conference and we want you to just do whatever you can, explain this away. We don't want the public to have any more interest in this. And so that's what they did for years. And over the period of time that Hynek was working with the Air Force, he came to realize, I don't want to do this anymore because this is just not true that they're making me do this. There are cases that really need to be studied. And the thing that really nailed it for him in a negative way was because of the sightings that took place in '68 over Michigan. And he thought he could get away with using the phrase swamp gas to explain some of the UFO sightings there. And it lasted about 5 minutes before then Congressman Gerald Ford of Michigan said, no, enough is enough. You can't keep lying. You can't keep referring to our UFO citizen reporters as being ridiculous. No, I demand a congressional hearing about this. And he got it. It was the first actual congressional hearing about UFOs. The second person that we have on the album is Congressman J. Edward Roush. He was the chairman of those congressional hearings, and way back then, he was saying, we don't know what this is, but we need to find out. The people want to know what a UFO is, and so to answer your question, we now know from things. If you follow the timeline of when and how the U.S. government and military started looking at UFOs, but they were only talking about it behind the scenes. They weren't being transparent to the public. So just because the Air Force said in 1969, we're ending Project Blue Book because, number one, there's nothing about any of these things that indicate to us any interest at all by the scientific community. Also, there's no reason to think that these UFO things have anything to do with our national security. And number three, we've seen no evidence at all that any of these objects could be even considered extraterrestrial. End of Blue Book. Go about your daily lives. move on, nothing more to see here. And now we know it was a lie because it's been admitted to through so many years. The whatever the thing was that crashed at Roswell, New Mexico in 1947, which began as a newspaper front page headline from the Roswell Daily Record that said the military has captured a flying saucer or a flying disc. And then the very next day, they rescinded that and said, no, sorry, it's a weather balloon. Well, there's no flying saucer. We don't have anything like that. And then it kept getting built up, and that morphed into, that's not a weather balloon. It's actually one of our spy balloon, high altitude, high atmospheric satellites to spy on the Soviet Union. Well, that lasted for a few years. And they were actually, when the story came out that there were bodies associated with whatever it was that crashed, well, then the Air Force had to come up with something, and they started showing the press black and white film clips of crash test dummies. But the problem with that was that now we know historically crash test dummies of the ones that they showed weren't even used until years later. So they weren't being used in 1947. But the Air Force figured we can get away if we just keep making up these stories. And it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger until finally we didn't hear any more from the Air Force. And then all of a sudden, in December 2017, when the New York Times puts out a story that was the game changer story on many levels, because they basically had the Pentagon admitting we've really been investigating UFOs and for a very long time now. And we've got cases from Navy jet fighter pilots during activities off the coast of San Diego by the USS Nimitz. And we have pilots now on record saying that they were chasing these things and blah, blah, blah. And now the world knows about a UFO called a Tic Tac that they were photographing. And suddenly it became obvious in December of 2017, we've been lied to for all these years. What's the deal? And you want to know what else has become really apparent? And I love this. Ever since that piece came out in the Times in 2017, and it focused on the Navy pilots, that they were chasing these things, they were being outmaneuvered by, where's the Air Force? Why aren't they talking about this? Why aren't they helping the Navy? Why aren't they assisting in this? No, you can just hear the mechanism of what they were saying behind the scenes. Oh, the Navy's got it now. We don't need any more egg on our face. Let's just kind of let it go and see how the Navy handles it. That's what's been going on.
No, it seems pretty obvious at this point.
Can I ask one thing?
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lee, you're talking about an era that I know. I was born and raised in upstate New York my entire life, and these are things that go back into the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
That later period was when I was going to school and then into the military. But if you could maybe touch on, these are important cases you're talking about, but they weren't isolated, because I was there growing up back then. And if you were in the upper Hudson Valley in the 70s,
that's right.
That was a massive.
Yes.
There were so many stories that nobody outside of upstate New York ever heard about.
That's right.
But there were so many damn reports. I didn't personally get to see anything until much later in my life, but there were so many people that had encounters. And just reflect on that for a moment, if you would. I mean, that was a huge wave, wasn't it?
I first heard about the Hudson Valley case. NBC Radio hired me to come on the air and to do nightly UFO reports, which had never been done before by a big network like NBC, because it was a music station, and they heard what I was getting ready to do at the United Nations at the end of 1978 about UFOs. And they said, would you like to come on NBC and do these reports? So I said, yes. And about just a few months after I started doing these reports, suddenly news started to break. And as you say, kind of only in the New York area at first, but it was, what's going on north of New York City in the Hudson Valley. And it was kind of big news. People were reporting not just UFOs, but a variety of paranormal activity in the whole Hudson Valley area. And one thing that caught my eye on this was that Dr. J. Allen Hynek was so interested in what was going on in Hudson Valley that he made trips there and he did his own investigations there. And then he and I spoke, and I actually spent a week, since I was on every weeknight doing these short reports. And so I decided to do a week-long series of the Hudson Valley reports. And so I had interviewed some people who had sightings there, and that was, for me, and possibly for many other people, the first inclination that there was something going on in the Hudson Valley. And you know, just about a month ago, I did a presentation up in Pine Bush, New York, right in the middle of the Hudson Valley.
I was just in Pine Bush 3 weeks ago with
Were you? Oh, yeah.
It's a great spot.
I didn't see the sign, but somebody told me, and I saw it. I guess I saw it on TV as you're approaching. You know the famous sign as you're approaching Las Vegas. It says "Welcome to Las Vegas." You know that sign we've all seen. Well, apparently, as you're coming into Pine Bush, there's a sign that says "Welcome to Pine Bush, the UFO capital of the world," or something like that.
And there's a huge diner that we just dined at.
The Cup and Saucer.
The Cup and Saucer. I actually ate at the Cup and Saucer 3 weeks ago, and they've got this beautiful sign up on the top. They really embrace it.
Well, you know, I'll tell you, I don't know if you noticed it, but directly across the road from the Cup and Saucer was the only hotel there, and we stayed there. And my wife and I were there, and we ate all of our meals at the Cup and Saucer, because how could you not?
Yeah.
Wow. Lee and I have now established a connection. We were just there.
Jazz, I was just thinking that. I was like, I think I found kindred spirits here.
This is like synchronicity. Yeah. My wife and I were just there for the purpose of going to the museum.
Oh, I'm going to tell you about the museum in a minute now, too, because well, first of all, when we were there, it was because it was the annual Pine Bush UFO Festival and Paranormal Museum grand opening. Okay, so we were hungry, so we wanted to get something to eat before actually driving the half mile into town. Okay,
it's not far.
Yeah, it's not far at all.
Everything in Pine Bush is walking distance.
That's right, and even from across the street, away from the front of the Cup and Saucer, you could see from a very far distance, they had this gigantic green alien balloon creature standing right at the front steps of the Cup and Saucer. I mean, it was like, you think of a green alien as being about 3 feet tall. This thing was like 30 feet tall. You couldn't miss it. And you'd walk into the Cup and Saucer, and there's UFO stuff everywhere. They had a whole display case, Cup and Saucer alien cups, T-shirts. I mean, and the food was really good because we love diners.
I agree with that.
And so we had every intention of really checking out the new Paranormal Museum there, because it was having its grand opening that weekend. But I was busy because I was one of 3 speakers to do presentations there. It was myself, Richard Dolan, and Mark D'Antonio. And so we were doing a variety of things, interviews. We actually all ended up doing different presentations. And it wasn't until Sunday, the end of the actual event, that we had all of our bags packed. We put everything into our car, and we drove across the street to have one last meal at the Cup and Saucer. And we drove into town because we at least wanted to take any kind of a close look at this museum, because I knew that they opened their doors at noon, and we wanted to be on the road by about 1 o'clock. So,
oh my God, go back and look at my Twitter feed. The same thing happened to us. We showed up at 1 o'clock, and you can't go through until 4. Oh my God.
Well, during the whole weekend, people came from everywhere. I mean, the festivities, the parade, the local police cordoned off and blocked off all vehicular traffic from one side of Main Street to the other. And so it was only for pedestrians, because on both sides of the street, they had all these people with their kiosks, and, they had vendors there selling little UFO tchotchkes and things. But the museum was right in the middle of all of that. And all day long, people were standing out in line to get into this new museum. What's in there? What's in there? and I noticed that it said, opens at 12. And so we got there Sunday, and I know the man named Lance. Okay, Lance is the creator of the museum, and he runs it, and Lance Hollywell. And I had called ahead of time to ask if he was going to be around noontime, because I'd like to at least maybe take like a 5-minute tour or something. And we got there. We were there with some friends. We all walked up to the front door. It was locked. It was like 12 noon. I'm like, damn. And we started walking away, and I heard the door unlock. I turned, and a young lady opened the door, and I went right over to her, and I said, "Oh, hi, do you work here?" And she said, "Yes, but we're not actually open yet." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." And she said, "Do I know you? You look very familiar." And right there on the inside of the door, they had a big poster up of all the weekend events. Speakers: Lee Speigel, Mark D'Antonio, Richard Dolan. She said, "Are you this guy on the poster?" And I said, "Well, yes, I am. Come on in."
Love it. Real quick, Kelly Dodge with a $6.99 donation. Thank you, my lady. She says, "Thank you for the amazing interview." And this is so far, we found kindred spirits. We've listened to some cool radio clips. Yeah, what were you gonna say, Lee?
Is Lee your middle name, Kelly? Because my middle name is Lee. My name is Elliot Lee Spiegel.
Oh, Elliot Lee. Now that sounds like a
now we're talking.
It sounds like an old man in the sea. I'm waiting for a cigar and maybe a couple of cats in the background.
Actually, I think there's some lights. There's some lights following me right now. I'm not sure what that is.
No, that's synchronicity. Yeah,
indeed it is.
Well, thank you, Kelly Lee Dodge, from all of us. So we walked into the museum gift shop, and I asked if Lance was there today, and she said, "Yeah, he's in the back. I'll let him know that you're here." Meantime, she said, "Walk around," and the gift shop was the only place where they would allow you to take pictures of anything. But there was a lot of stuff to photograph right there in the gift shop. It was very cool. And a couple of minutes later, Lance came out, because we had a lot of contact all weekend. And he said, "Well, how much time do you guys have?" And I said, "Well, we only wanted to take about a 5-minute tour." He said, "How about I give you the 25-cent tour?" And he had one of the women who does the tours take us behind the scenes of the Paranormal Museum. And they've got some really great stuff in there. I mean, they really did it right. They've got displays there. They have a recreation of a room that takes you into what is essentially, it looks like an operating table from a hospital, and it's surrounded by these tall ET creatures. And you can have pictures taken of you if you want to lie down on the table with these ETs that are reaching out to touch you. It's very freaky. They have they have another room where you're inside a house, and you can hear the wind blowing outside the windows, and they have a big window there with trees going back and forth, and you hear this, and you're looking at the window, and suddenly a Bigfoot creature appears at the window. And I mean, certainly it's not the real thing, but boy, it looks really good. It's just stuff like that is really very impressive. My friend Mark D'Antonio, he has a company called FX Models, where he creates models and prototypes of things. He's had a high enough secret clearance to build military prototypes of things that might be used in the future by our military forces, new kinds of land vehicles or undersea vehicles or on the water. And so he's created things for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Army, the Pentagon, and they asked him at the museum if he could create some dioramas. to put inside the museum of famous encounters throughout history. And he put all these things together, and just really, really well done.
Well, we just shared the link to the museum, so if you
good.
guys want to check it out, please do.
Yeah.
But you had mentioned earlier Mr. J. Allen Hynek.
Yeah.
And there's a cool clip in the UFOs Credibility Factor album. So I wanted to bring that clip up and listen to it real quick, and then sort of ask you about J. Allen Hynek and what it was like to work with him.
Yeah, absolutely.
While you play that clip, can you take me off for a second?
Absolutely, sir.
My wife just came home. We're waiting for some
This is
medical
a very
results.
real phenomenon. Any attempt to explain UFOs away as imagination or as natural events is just nonsense. They seem to be programmed in some way, and that sort of implies an intelligence. It is a global phenomenon from many, many countries. And the astounding thing is that the same sorts of things are being reported from all these countries. I would defy anyone to distinguish between a French UFO, a British UFO, a Japanese UFO, a South American one. They all are reporting essentially the same things.
As a result of his past involvement with the Air Force, many people still feel that Dr. Hynek is being secretly funded by the government in some way to discredit UFO reports.
No, not at all. Absolutely not being funded. And as a matter of fact, unless there were really no strings attached, I think it would be very unwise to accept government funds, because people would say, well, this is just another government setup or something of the sort. I have no connections with the Air Force now whatsoever.
The music.
On September 8th,
the music is so cool. So what do you, I mean, what he's saying is incredible there to me. And, and just to add a little bit of levity of who's talking, J. Allen Hynek is an astronomer that has patents that are used on, I believe, the space station in Hubble. He's a legitimate astronomer that looked at something and changed his mind in real time. So that's the thing that really fascinates me about J. Allen Hynek the most is, because you always get this, if it's something that's real, why aren't astronomers talking about it? They have a few astronomers now, especially.
Can you imagine his personal conflict? The 20 years that he worked for the Air Force as their chief scientific spokesperson, and he had to go to various places to do press conferences and to explain away UFO sightings that he realized after a while, we don't know how to explain these things, but I'm not supposed to say that, to the press. And he was the second person that I interviewed for my album, UFOs: The Credibility Factor. The first person that I interviewed was another scientist, nuclear physicist scientist, Stanton Friedman. And in fact, Stan was the first person I ever interviewed about anything in my life. But he was so generous. He was living at the time in California, and he welcomed me to his home. And I loved his whole attitude, and which basically was some UFOs are really somebody else's intelligently controlled extraterrestrial spacecraft. Not all UFOs.
I have that clip.
I know you've got that clip.
It's one of my favorite clips.
Yeah.
And again, another, these are the giants, again, the shoulders that we're standing on. The reason why we get to talk about this the way we do is because of the work, the path that these guys laid forward. And man, my only regret is I wish I'd met Stanton Friedman, because I think it would have just been a really fun conversation.
He was great. We used to talk like once every couple of weeks, because he would call me and say, "Hey Lee, what do you think about this new document I got? What is this thing? Roscoe Hillenkotter, the old general, and he started the CIA. I found this old thing using the Freedom of Information Act. You want me to send it to you?" Yes, Stan.
Yes, please. Well, let's listen to the man real quick in his own words, because it's really cool.
Go ahead.
It's time to respond.
some UFOs are really flying saucers. In other words, are really somebody else's spacecraft, intelligently controlled extraterrestrial vehicles.
Stanton Friedman, nuclear physicist, who says we must keep open minds regarding the reality of UFOs coming from other planets.
They probably come from a variety of sources for a variety of purposes. Certainly there's an intelligence behind the maneuverability. And one of the places where even people who want to believe in UFOs come a cropper is they don't understand the maneuverability. That's not mystery, it's technology. When somebody says that that bit of UFO behavior is impossible, what they mean is, I don't know how to do that. And if I don't know how to do it, it must be impossible. Well, that kind of approach is obviously ridiculous. I mean, it's not scientific.
Oh man, that music, I just love it. But that's again another man. The difference between Stanton Friedman toward the end of his career, and Stan Friedman in this time period, that his prime.
Yeah.
Oh man, I wish he had the fire and the thunder that he did back then. I mean, he was still fascinating to listen to, but I feel like he almost got a little picked on sometimes in presentations because he didn't believe certain stories, or he wouldn't go with certain frames, ways of thinking, and I respected that about him. But man, if he had the fire that he had, if he was just 20 years younger, he would have wiped the floor in a debate with a lot of these guys, and it wouldn't have even been a question.
Doesn't it seem really sad to anybody else that Stanton Friedman spent his entire life working on the stuff that we're all working on now, and the progress that's been seen, and he died that close to the finish line? I mean, it breaks my heart to think that was when he left the world, and then what, a handful of years later, suddenly it's like the government's like, oh yeah, UFOs are real, by the way, and it's like, it just seems so unjust to me, doesn't it, Lee? I mean, like,
oh yeah,
did that all that? I mean, how much would he have loved to have been here right now?
But he only complained. He didn't always complain publicly. He knew people were listening to him. I was forever grateful. On the day that he called me shortly after I started working for NBC in 1978, and as you guys all know, and most people know, that Stan was the original civilian investigator of the Roswell story, and he called me one day in '78, and he said, "Listen, I've been talking to this guy. I've just made his acquaintance. He's getting on in years, and he's telling me this story about something that happened almost 30 years ago in a place called Roswell, New Mexico." And I said, "Okay, I'm not familiar with Roswell, New Mexico. What's the story?" He said, "Well, he apparently was the main intelligence officer at Roswell Army Airfield. His name is Jesse Marcel. And he wants, before he gets much older, he wants the real story to come out about his involvement with going out to this ranch and picking up debris and the whole story that blew up over that. And I told him about you," he said, "that you're with NBC and you're a friend of mine. And he's agreed to give you an interview." I went, "Really? Okay, I think I'd like to hear what he has to say." Again, I didn't know anything about Roswell. And I realized that most people in the public had probably forgotten what the word Roswell meant. This was 1977, 78, when Stan was first meeting up with Jesse. And so Stan gave me Jesse's phone number, and I called him. And we had a lovely, lovely conversation. And I still really wasn't impressed at that point with who's this Jesse Marcel guy, until I heard his version of when he was told to go out to the ranch, the Brazel Ranch, and to pick up whatever landed or crashed out there, and to hear him talk about it. And we've got him in our movie, The Phenomenon, talking, and it's riveting. I mean, it's just riveting when he describes, if this was a weather balloon, why did it take up the space of what Jesse said was about 3 football fields. I mean, or something like that.
I might have a little bit of an answer on that.
Okay.
And I know you had something to say, rather. So did you want to chime in real quick before I pivot?
You go for it, Lou.
Well, I mean, the mogul balloon, in some cases, those balloons were taller than the Washington Monument. It's a lot of metal. It's a lot of pieces. It's a lot of debris. I want to believe Roswell. There's nothing more in the world that I want for that to be true. But I feel like it could go both ways. It could go either way. It could very well have been, because for me, for Jesse Marcel, I think something more difficult to tell, say, your family, your friends, and to be sort of asked to push it would be a lie to cover up secret technology that we didn't want the Russians to know about. So, hey, we put out the story of UFOs. Great. Awesome. Let's stick with that because we know it's not that. And we want to push this, we want to keep this technology suppressed as much as we can so we don't give it away from our enemies. I mean, there's a lot of other reasons, but primarily that's why I think, maybe there could have been 3 football fields worth of debris without it being something completely extraterrestrial. And real quick, Akashi Chris with a $5 super sticker. Really appreciate it. Pat Calabria says, man, I wish these scientists could be here for disclosure for $2. I really appreciate it. And then we had, I think, 2 more here real quick. One from Marv A. I love the enthusiasm here at UCR. Hey, I love the fact that you are helping support the show. We're a public access channel. We're supported by viewers like you. So thank you very much. Sally Van Voord. Sally Van de Voord. Oh, I like that.
I do too.
Great show, you guys, with a $5 donation. Really appreciate you guys. Appreciate the love. You guys are coming so strong today. But I mean, what do you think about that, Lee? What do you think? Could it have been just something a little more terrestrial, or are you 100% convinced?
Oh, I'm 100% convinced. Just talking to Jesse, because why would he wait until almost the end of his life, like a deathbed confession, to want to get this off of his chest? He didn't have to talk to Stan Friedman. He didn't have to tell Stan he'd talk to me. And the other thing is, when I was talking to Jesse and getting his information, he said, Mr. Speigel, there were some other people that were there in 1947 who were part of our crew, who are still alive, who worked on this. Would you like to talk to any of them? And I said, yes. What kind of a person? He said, well, there was a man at the time. He was a flight engineer. His name was Robert Porter. And when General Roger Ramey and I were posing for all those famous, internationally famous pictures of us posing for the press, showing us holding up pieces of what they said was a weather balloon, the real stuff that we brought back from the ranch was being loaded onto one of our bombers before it flew to Fort Worth for further analysis. And this flight engineer, Robert Porter, he was one of the people out there on the tarmac lifting up these gigantic sized pieces of something and putting them up into the bomber while we were somewhere else showing the phony stuff. Would you like to talk to flight engineer Porter? And I said, yes, of course. I called Porter. He got on the phone. And what he told me was he was out there. All these things that were large pieces of something were all covered up with some kind of tarpaulin or cloth or blankets. So he didn't actually see what it was, but they were so big. He said to a guy that was standing inside the plane that he had to hand these things to, he said, well, I'm going to need some help lifting these things up. And the guy up in the top said, no, don't worry. Just pick it up. And whatever this gigantic thing was, he said it weighed like a feather. It had no weight to it. He could see that it was solid under the top, but it didn't weigh anything. Right. I mean, I'm at this point, he's got my attention on the phone, that I'm hearing this story. And it was like that with so many of these pieces. The famous story that Jesse Marcel talked about, where even out on the field, they found all these pieces of something that they tried to dent it with a sledgehammer. They tried to burn it. They tried to twist it and tear it, completely indestructible. And there were other pieces of things out there that looked like to the eye, it looked like the tin foil that you see inside cigarette packages, that kind of material. And he said we could take it and we would scrunch it all up into a ball, and we'd open our hands and it would go right back to its original size. 1947. Right. Who has this technology in 1947?
What do you got, Rather?
Well, yeah, I guess kind of one of the problems I have is that, are we any closer to actually knowing the truth to this? 70 years later, there's still no definitive evidence. And, kind of going back to what Jazz was saying about, it does feel like we're really close to the finish line right now. But, are we? Did it feel the same way back then? I kind of imagine it might have.
Okay. In I think it was 1952 or 53. This was an interview. I did this interview with Gordon Cooper, one of our original astronauts. And in our movie, The Phenomenon, he even talks more about this. Before he became an astronaut, he was a flight manager at Edwards Air Force Base in California. And he had a camera crew, out in one of the dry lake beds out there at the airbase, and they were filming certain things out there. And he was in his office, and the phone rang, and it was one of his guys out there. And he said, "Well, Captain Cooper, listen, we've I don't know how to tell you this, but this thing just came out of the sky. It's circular. 3 little tripod type legs came out from the bottom of it, and it just landed out there in front of us. What do you want us to do?" And Cooper said to them, "You guys have cameras? You're looking out there?" "Yes, sir." "Well, start filming." Did you need to call me for that? and they did. And he said, "Bring the cameras back to me." And they did. And he was able to look at the raw footage, and he said he held it up and he could see what this thing was before it took off and was gone. Well, a few phone calls later, and someone came apparently originally from Washington to pick up the package and take it from Cooper. And I said to him in the interview, well, what happened to the package? He said it was just taken and it was sent off to Washington, never to be seen again.
Do you think that they're hiding? Do you think they're hiding the evidence, or do you think they're hiding conclusions too?
Well, it could be a little of both. It could be a little of both, but I didn't press him any further on that issue when he said never to be seen again. But when James Fox and I, a few years ago, were doing our interview with Senator Harry Reid, and before Gordon Cooper died, James had done another interview with Cooper, and they were talking about this thing that happened at Edwards Air Force Base. And when James said, "We understand that you got the film," and it was sent to Washington, and he said, "Yeah, that's right." And James said, "Well, did you ever follow up on this story?" And we have him on camera in The Phenomenon saying, "Well, who would I follow up with? Who would I call? When anything is above your grade level of need to know, you don't even bother asking questions. It's out of your jurisdiction. End of story." Well, I understand it. Need to know. It's all about need to know. We have a clip in The Phenomenon where several years ago, former President Bill Clinton was giving a speech to an audience overseas. And after the speech was over, he was taking questions from the audience. And one person said, can you tell us, we understand that when you were president, you might have had some interest in finding out what the truth was about either Roswell or what's really going on at Area 51. And rather than be glib about it, Clinton said, "Well, I'll tell you, I did look into these things, and it turned out that I wasn't told anything, that any information that I was asking for, it's entirely possible that there were some of my underlings there at the White House deliberately didn't let me know this any kind of information. And it may be that this is the kind of stuff where if you don't have a high enough classification or need to know, information like this can also be kept hidden from elected presidents." He said, "I wouldn't be the first president in history whose underlings kept information from me, and I'm almost embarrassed to say I did look into it." We have him on film saying that. And I was thinking, wow, has any other president made any kind of a statement like that without laughing it off? No, he was the first. And that's a very powerful statement. I may be the first president, or no, he said the other elected presidents may not have a need to know because it's above their pay scale. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Why would he even have been allowed to say something like that? But as we know, Bill Clinton was the kind of guy who, if he wanted to say something, he was just going to say it.
Lee was there, talking to people that were, as you would say, on the ground. Very briefly,
yeah,
if you guys don't mind, I've always had this one question that I think I would like to put to Lee.
Yeah.
Because you talked to the people who were actually involved. My entire take on Roswell, not that my take matters for anything any more than anybody else's, everybody agrees something fell on the ranch. Something.
Right.
Something landed. Weather balloon, that's pretty much entirely ruled out. Everybody knows that. But in that first 24, 48 hours, Lee, what I always come back to, and I would like to ask you about this, is, okay, something fell, some period of days went by, the ranch owner went and said, oh, hey, some stuff fell on my ranch, and then the scramble started.
Right.
Right. And then somebody at the Roswell Army Air Force place had to go and get their PR person to go talk to the press. Before that happened, there must have been a meeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my question has always been, okay, if a weather balloon fell, well, nobody's even going to go help you clean that up. They're going to be like, sorry, our weather balloon fell. So that's out of the window. But when the other choices are put on the table, they're like, oh, we have to put out a press release. We have to say what happened. Who was the person who sat at that meeting, Lee, who was like, oh, should we say it was an advanced air experiment? Should we say it was a natural thing? And then there was somebody at the meeting who was like, wait, I know. Let's say it was a flying saucer. That'll throw everybody off the trace. That's always been my question. Who was the person who came up and said, well, our first press release is going to be aliens? And then 24 hours later, it's like it was a weather balloon. How did that happen, Lee?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how it happened. I'm guessing that one of the people who may have made the decision, well, it was Walter Howard, who was the press information officer there at the base. He was the one who issued that initial.
Oh.
Nope.
Did we leave? Lee's frozen?
Got too close to the truth.
Got too close to the truth.
Oh my God, the NSA is watching this.
Okay, so real quick, well, while we're figuring out what's happening with Lee, hopefully he can reconnect. Worst case scenario, these things happen. First world problems. Apollo 11 with a $5 donation. Fan of UCR and been a big fan of Lee Speigel for a long time. I used to listen to him often on Alejandro Rojas's show UFO Think Tank years ago. That's one of the first things I said to him is I used to love and listen to you on Alejandro Rojas's show, and Alejandro Rojas is a huge influence on this show as well. And one of the gracious people who came on the show first. So huge shout out to Alejandro. And yeah, I'm totally with you. And then UFO T here with a $20 donation. What does Lee think happened to the ET bodies from the crash? We'll ask him as soon as he gets back, and he answers Jazz's question. But yeah, I mean. That's a great question, Jazz. Like, how did that happen?
How did that become the first go-to answer? We got to, okay, now the news knows something crashed on the ranch. What should we say? Okay, I could see weather balloon. I could see, well, we have a secret Russian detection thing, and we should come up with another explanation. There was one guy at the meeting who was like, no, hold on. Let's say it was a flying saucer. Yeah. That'll make everybody calm down and not ask any more questions. Like, I want to know who the friggin' rocket scientist was who was like, this is our press release. And somebody at the top was like, oh, bingo, raise for you. Let's go with that.
Well, that's
that's never made any sense to me.
Go for it.
Really. I think we need to look at who was demoted or whose career stage ended
I was
that.
Just about to say nobody was demoted. Regardless. Nobody was demoted. Not the press secretary, not Jesse Marcel, not anyone. So nobody. Because You think if you put a press release out, man, I wish Lee was here. And Bill, if you can, I'm sure Bill's working on getting him back. I just sent him a message. I'm sure he'll be back in a second. All he's got to do is re-click the link.
Are we still on the radio?
We're still on the radio. We're still live. Yeah,
okay,
everyone's still. It was just it was just Lee. But yeah, like this idea, like nobody got fired, nobody got sent to a weather station in Alaska or Antarctica. Like it was business as usual, and that's sort of the red flag for me that tells me, okay, this was military tech, because why was nobody fired? And I think carrying the guilt of having to make a statement like that, which is absolutely out of this world, literally an out of this world statement. And then the statement gets flopped around to a complete 180 the next day. And then you're asked, in the name of national security, you have to be the guy who takes the bullet on this. All right, we got Lee back. Lee, we got you back. And we were just discussing this about Jazz's question, and sort of like that's the one red flag for me about Roswell, is this idea that, you know, nobody got fired, nobody got demoted after this UFO story came out in the press, and then the next day they do a 180, and it's like, oh, why did nobody get in trouble for this? And again, just going back to the guilt of what Jesse Marcel had, you know, because if it's like, look, Jesse, you have to take this bullet for the United States government. You're going to have to look like a fool for the rest of your life, but we're not going to demote you. You're going to get promotions. It's not going to affect your career, but we have to push this story because it's protecting national secrets. So, I mean, what do you think about that, Lee? And go back to Jazz's question. I literally lost you as you started your thought, so I apologize about that.
No, I'm hearing everything in double.
Are you? Okay, so just do us a favor and back out real quick, and then hit the link again. It should.
Okay. Let me.
Yeah, I hear it.
Oh, and now.
Yeah, when I have StreamYard and YouTube going at the same time, I hear it double too.
Yeah, well, no, sometimes when he might be lagging on his end, and
well,
so
he
that's
gets
why
back
he's getting,
in. I mean, Rather's the science guy. My question has always been, it's like, if a weather balloon, which was answer 2 out of the 5 answers we've had, if a weather balloon fell on somebody's ranch, do you honestly believe the United States Army Air Force would send battalions of people out to collect a weather balloon?
That's
if
true.
you live next door to a base that sent up weather balloons every damn day, I think they would have been like, dude,
but it was a top secret weather balloon, to be fair.
It, you know. So I mean, weather balloon was like the worst answer of any of them.
All right, Rather, what do you got to say? Then we'll hand it over.
Well, yeah, just like what you're saying is that, you know, the weather balloon's obviously not true, but it could be the official story is that it's, you know, top secret weather balloon that was, you know, trying to detect atomic radiation from the Soviets.
Oh, it's Project Mogul.
Yeah, I could see them, you know, doing that for Project Mogul.
Right. And guys, we're going to get to your super chats here in a second. So apologies. We're just waiting for Lee to get back in, so I don't want to lose any of these in the process. Let's see here. Hopefully we'll get him back and we'll get his thoughts on it. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's definitely the weirdest part of this story that for me doesn't connect. And I think it's a valid question, and it's a good question. Like, how the hell? Who was the guy who made the decision to go, yep, let's do it? All right, Lee's back in. Let's test the sound. Lee, how you doing? Is it sounding better?
Let me see here. I'm going to bring you back into the middle of my screen. I'm only hearing myself once, and damn, once is enough, really.
Once is enough. Okay, all right. So thank God we got it figured out, and hey, don't worry about it. This is the flow of the show.
No, it's the Men in Black, man. They're after my ass. That's all. What can I say?
Clearly, that's what it is.
Susan Goff is outside your house in an ice cream truck right now.
Oh, well, all right. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, Lee loves ice cream. So Lee, so what do you think about sort of? And I hope you kind of caught the gist of what we're saying here.
Tell me again. Go ahead.
So basically, you know, this idea of, you know, who was it that made the decision to release this initial press conference or or thing, then reverse it, and then nobody who was involved in that process gets demoted or fired. In fact, they get promoted throughout their careers.
Well, there were so many aspects of what happened in that first 24 to 48 hours that also involved. Let's not forget that the local undertaker, Ev Roswell, who was called by someone from the Army Air Base and asked if he could create small casket-like boxes and have them delivered someplace, and they wouldn't tell him why, but they obviously were something that were going to be fitting something of the size of a child. Okay, that's part of the story, and they were all told to keep quiet about that. General Roger Ramey was probably one of the people who was most instrumental in telling. He was completely above Jesse Marcel. Jesse Marcel was the intelligence officer at the whole base, and he pretty much did what he was told. If he was told to go out to a field or a ranch and pick stuff up and bring it to the airbase, he did it. But he also did something else that he wasn't told to do, which probably could have gotten him demoted, because on the way home, he had a truck, and he drove the truck not directly to the airbase with a lot of the material that he had picked up, but he drove it to his house on the way back to the base. And it was very late at night, and he awakened both his wife and his young son, Jesse Marcel Jr., who would later grow up to become his own decorated military person and doctor. And he brought them down into the kitchen, where before he woke them up, he had spread a lot of the material out on the kitchen floor and said, just wanted to show you something that I just brought back from the Brazel Ranch. What do you think of this? And their son, Jesse Jr., was all over the place. And he was like looking at stuff, and he found a couple of pieces that looked like just things that were about this big, but they had weird looking symbols on them that Jesse Sr. would later say it reminded him of Egyptian hieroglyphics. But nobody could understand or decipher what these symbols were. Jesse Jr. drew pictures of them, and there have been pictures that have come out where people can actually see a reproduction of them. But eventually, Jesse Sr. had to put all the stuff back in the truck and continue on to the base with everything. You didn't see any of this kind of stuff in those famous pictures where Jesse is posing with the material with General Ramey. And so there's so many questions. So many people had to be silenced with a variety of different kinds of threats to their lives, to themselves, to their families. And that was probably one of the earlier renditions of what I would think of as a non-disclosure, where you'd have to sign something that would prove that your signature said you would not say anything about this, or if you did, and they still do this now, it could affect the rest of your career, your retirement, your pension, the safety and health and welfare of your families. And when you get told something like that, you shut the hell up, and you don't make anything known more about what you think is the truth of what really happened. And so the large question is, would the Air Force have gone through all of this trouble to get people to be quiet, totally quiet, over a weather balloon? Even that Project Mogul, the Soviet spy balloon, was it all that important to keep people quiet? And again, I'm a great believer in, look at the timeline of what we're talking about here, okay? Roswell was 1947. Wow, another interesting thing happened in 1947. General Nathan Twining of the Air Materiel Command wrote a very, very revealing memo to upper management, upper echelons, basically saying, in the subject line of his very famous memo, the subject read, AMC, Air Materiel Command, AMC opinion of flying discs. And he goes into this whole memo basically saying, here's the current opinion of these things that we are admitting only to you here within the military. There are objects that are operating in our skies, and it says the phenomenon is something real. He starts off just like that. The phenomenon. In fact, we stole that those two words for the title of our movie, The Phenomenon, because he refers to it in the memo several times as the phenomenon is something real. It's not fictitious. It's not made up. Objects in the sky that approximate the size of man-made aircraft, circular with a dome on top, capable of evasive maneuvers when confronted by friendly aircraft, outmaneuvering anything we have. Doesn't this all sound like it's just been said like a week ago or back in June when an unidentified report was released by the intelligence communities? And I say to people, let's keep this simple. Look at the timeline. In June, this unclassified report that was released supposedly to the public and media would have been more interesting instead of seeing a 9-page unclassified report. Why didn't they give us the longer classified report? That's the one that people in Congress had a chance to look at. However, they said in that report pretty much what Nathan Twining was talking about in his memo. There are things operating in our skies. We don't know where they come from. We don't know what their agenda is. They can operate with impunity wherever they go. And we're thinking, well, we're letting you know, we're very sure it's not any kind of American technology. So we're going to look into the idea that it might be Russian or Chinese. Well, fine. And I say to that, here in 2021, who had this technology in 1947? I mean, really, 1947, if that's what Nathan Twining was telling the Air Material Command, there's the question. Who had this technology then? And he was asking that question then. Do any of us here think that we, America, Russia, China, anybody on Earth had objects that could do this? Probably not. So I like to keep it straight, keep it simple. We don't have to over-embellish or ask questions or wonder, well, who gave the order to do this or who gave the order to do this? It's like, what do we really think happened behind the scenes? If you keep it quiet, the Air Force has tried for so long to keep things quiet. Oh, and what I especially like about talking about these things is really when the Game Changer New York Times article came out in 2017, where the Pentagon finally admitted it had been really investigating UFOs for several years, and we're not really sure what these things are. Many of them can be explained, but there's a percentage that we don't know what they are. And again, this was like the Air Force, the Pentagon was saying these things, and yet have we noticed that? And that particular image of the videos that we've all seen that were released by the Navy, those 3 famous videos of objects, UAPs, UFOs, a Tic Tac UFO, all done by Navy jet pilots. Where's the Air Force been in all of this? We haven't heard a single peep from the Air Force when that New York Times piece came out. It's as if they were saying behind the scenes, oh, okay, the Navy's got it now. Let's just keep it quiet. Yeah. We don't have anything more to say about it because the pressure's not on us right now. Now it's got to be on the Navy. Where's the Air Force? Right. Nowhere to be seen.
Can I toss a grenade into this before we get done?
Yeah, please.
Really quickly.
Please.
For Lee. And this is something that's been stuck in my mind for a long time now. You're obviously up to date on all the news about the new ASRO. You know, if Kirsten Gillibrand's amendment goes through, ATIP being handed off to this new office, this new supposed era of, openness, maybe not to the public,
right,
but inside the government, finding all this stuff out. Do you think it's going to be just the stuff since 2004, since 2015, or from the wording of the bill? And we did a show on this previously about what was written into the language of the bill. Is anybody now going to seriously take up the question of what happened in 1947, of what happened? Do you think that there's going to be new questions raised saying, you know what, that looks pretty suspicious, give us what you have from there? Or are we locked in now to people like Kirsten Gillibrand saying, tell us what happened since 2004.
I know. I don't think that it's the right decision to only focus going back to 2004, because we know that there were things that happened. Another perfect example. In October of 1973, what was that thing that Army Captain Larry Coyne almost collided in the sky over Ohio with? Nobody ever explained that, and it's like, well, why not? And I'll tell you, that was when I interviewed him, it was in 1975 for my record album. But a few years later, when I was preparing and getting ready to go to the United Nations, I wanted him to be one of my speakers at the UN to tell his story to the world. And he wanted to do it. But he said, but I'd like to come and be part of your presentation, but you're going to have to get permission from the Army. And I said, well, what do you mean? You're going to have to call my commanding officer in Ohio and get them to sign off on letting me come to the UN. Here's the guy's number. And so I did. I called his commander. The guy was very nice to me. I introduced myself and told him I was hoping that the Army could release Captain Coyne, now Lieutenant Colonel Coyne, in 1978, to come to the United Nations and to tell his story about what happened that night over Ohio. And the guy said to me, well, yes, we will consider letting Colonel Coyne go, but under one condition. I remember thinking, oh, what? Is he going to want my firstborn, my blood? What does he want? Does he want my rent? I mean, what can I possibly do? He said, we don't want to give the impression that Colonel Coyne would be going to the United Nations in an official capacity, seemingly to represent the Army and possibly the military forces by telling his story about something that's always been unexplained. However, we would let him go as long as he doesn't appear in dress uniform. I went, really? Oh, okay. I hadn't thought of that. Do you mean all I have to do is buy him a suit and it'll be okay if he speaks? He said, yeah, pretty much. He'll have our blessing because he won't be speaking officially for the military.
On behalf of the United States military.
Yeah, on behalf of the United States military. And that was all I had to hear. And I said, damn, I'll buy him 2 suits. If that's
if that's all I got to do.
I'll buy him another suit today.
Lee, we're talking about your trip to the UN, and I got a clip pulled up and I want to play it for everybody, but we're running out of time. We've only got 45 minutes, and I know that sounds like a ton of time, but there's so many things I'm trying to squeeze in here. So
what are you guys doing tomorrow?
Oh, yeah, right? Well, no, obviously we're going to have
supposed to be done 15 minutes ago.
Well, and hey, Jazz, if you got to get out of here, please.
No, not yet. I mean, we're still doing a medical check with my wife, and
no problem.
We're not going to be doing this till that's done. So,
okay.
No worries.
I'm not making a joke. We're in the middle of a thing.
No, I know you're not. So we've got if you could answer this as quickly as you can, because I kind of want to get off of Roswell.
Yeah.
UFOT had a $20 super chat question. Thank you so much, my lady. Guys, go check out her channel. It's a lot of fun. What does Lee think happened to the ET bodies from the crash? Thanks.
Well, who knows? If there were bodies, were those bodies placed in those little unidentified caskets that were asked to be built? And then where would they go? Were they possibly put on board the bomber that went to Fort Worth to start analyzing the wreckage? And a lot of that stuff not only went to Fort Worth, but eventually went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. So where did these things go to? And I hate to bring this up, but a lot of people still think that this Area 51 north of Las Vegas is a place where a lot of the crashes and bodies went to for analysis. But nobody's ever going to admit that. But it's how legends are born, whether they're real or based on fantasy. I mean, for all we know, it wasn't even until 1989 when George Knapp, the reporter from Las Vegas, broke the story that there was this place north of Las Vegas where the military tests brand new stealth aircraft. Of course, that's where they test it. They have to do things like that in secrecy and privacy. And that's how the legend, I believe, of bodies really kind of exploded. So if there were bodies of something that was part of that crash, I don't know where they are. I'm like Bill Clinton. I don't have a high enough need to know.
No, I think that's
Hangar 18.
Hangar 18. There you go. Matthew Wright with a $4.99 super sticker. Thank you so much for the donation. Again, you guys, I'm sorry if I missed a couple of these. We're just trying to make sure that we get these questions in as they fit the conversation. So please don't get upset. But John Music did have a $10 super chat question, and he says, "What do you think about former NSA agent Mike Ricksecker saying 2 days ago to Jimmy Church that there's enough data and sensor information to basically confirm that Alaska's Dark Pyramid is real, buried under a mountain 100 million years old?" I've never heard of this, so honestly, this is
no idea what's going on here.
I have never heard of that. I would love to see any more information about that. And it reminds me of something. I don't know the story behind this, but in the very first interview I ever did with Gordon Cooper, he told me that before he became an astronaut, he was flying a jet plane above the Sahara Desert, and he was just going over and just kind of sightseeing the sands of the hourglass and below him. And he said, I couldn't believe my eyes, but coming out of the sands of the desert was the top of an unknown pyramid. It was just sticking right up out of the ground. And when he tried to go around it, some kind of a dust storm appeared, and he couldn't find it again, presuming that it must have been covered up again. And I said, well, did you report this? Did you try and go back there? Did you get an expedition and try and figure out what this was? And he said, no, it wasn't within my purveyance of what I needed to know. And so we never followed through on it. But that's what this pyramid thing sounds like. There could be a lot of things, and there are a lot of things that are hidden all around the world that we don't know what they are and where they are. I mean, one good place to hide stuff would be at the bottom of the oceans. Hello, aliens in their USOs. I mean, really, what's going on? So I don't know. I think it would be fun. It would make a good movie, science fiction movie, if a pyramid was discovered somewhere. But then where do you go with that? Right. I'd rather just stick with the facts that we know on hand about these things.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's get real quick to this Jacques Vallée clip. That this is, from my understanding, from what Bill, our producer, says, this is the first time that this clip has ever been shared publicly. So
drop me off for a minute.
Yep, you got it, Jez. And thank you so much, Aaron, with the $5 super sticker. Totally appreciate it. So let's see if this pops up properly.
United Nations was, as I mentioned before,
for some reason the video's not coming up. Let's try loading it again here.
Yeah, see it now.
Oh, you see it now? Okay, let me load it one more time and see what happens. Boy, this is a technically filled challenge show here, but hey, we welcome the challenges. You know, they happen. What were you going to say?
This looks like it's from the Pine Bush presentation.
Indeed, it is, I believe. Okay, I'm going to load it one more time here. Hopefully, my computer doesn't completely crash.
Distinguished speaker.
Let's see here. Hopefully, the video just kick in.
To the United Nations was, as I mentioned before, astrophysicist Dr. Jacques Vallée. Yeah. The man who was portrayed in Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. As I said, that character was based on the real life Jacques Vallée.
Technical difficulties once again.
I don't like this guy's voice either. Anyway.
Oh, there we go. Now we got some video.
After the movie premiered, here he was at the United Nations.
Mr. Chairman, in the process of science, it is common for all human ideas to be challenged by new facts. New knowledge is born of this challenge. In the process of social development, it is common for new knowledge to trigger emotional reactions with far-reaching cultural and political effects. New beliefs are born of this confrontation. The frequent reporting of unexplained phenomena in the sky of many countries over the last 30 years presents an opportunity to observe both of these processes. In the document circulated prior to this meeting, and in our preliminary discussions with His Excellency Mr. Kurt Waldheim and representatives of the Outer Space Affairs Group, the essential facts of the phenomenon have been stated.
And because of our timing, I'm going to move a little further on.
So that was the clip, and then I think is there something else after this? Correct.
There are 5 more clips from Jacques.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's got all 5 in there.
Okay.
But yeah, let's talk about that. Sort of the trip to the United Nations, and what happened. By the way, is it okay, Lee, if we share some of these links and things that we talk about on our Discord so people can check them out?
Oh, I want you to. Yes.
Okay, excellent. So, and then because next I want to get to this Air Force manual, we have to talk about it before you get out of here. We just absolutely have to. But real quick, if you could sort of sum up that trip to the UN, because I thought the thing when I was watching the phenomenon, I was just screaming at myself, why didn't they make a movie just about this? Like, I wanted to see every minute how it happened, the players in the game, what was said, the whole thing. I thought that could have been a really cool film on its own, but I'd love to get your thoughts.
Well, the night is still young, maybe.
Yeah, right.
After I did my UFO album in 1975, I wanted to do something else that could reach more people about UFOs in a credible way. And I thought, well, what place is there on Earth where people might listen? And I thought of the United Nations. I lived in New York, and I knew where the United Nations was. Everybody does know. And people told me, you can't just go to the United Nations and knock on the door and ask if you could go in and do a presentation on UFOs, because one of 2 things will happen. You will either be politely taken off the premises, or you will be not so politely arrested. And so, I had to figure out, well, what am I going to do? And I was told that in order to do a presentation at the United Nations, you had to either be a citizen of a country that's interested in being transparent about UFOs. Well, I knew that our country was not very interested in doing that, so I couldn't go to anyone in Washington. And then I was told, or you could do a presentation if you were a delegate of another country that is open about UFOs that would want to sponsor your proposal. And in 1978, the only game in town was Grenada. There was no other country that was interested in really doing anything at the UN. Well, that's all changed now. Now we know that there are many countries that are really caught up in the UFO problem, and that's a good thing as we move forward. But I had to figure out a plan to do something with Grenada. Fortunately, the Prime Minister, Sir Eric Gary, was trying to get the UN to pay attention to his crusade about UFOs, about trying to do a United Nations investigative committee, that he wanted to have them do it in Grenada as the place for the clearinghouse of UFOs. And I didn't think that was a good idea. Nobody was paying attention to him, but I called his mission. Every country in the world has a mission or office near the United Nations. And I spoke to the ambassadors there, and I introduced myself. I said, I've just recently finished producing a UFO documentary record album for CBS. And I have an idea of how I could help you folks and your Prime Minister to do something at the United Nations. Can I come over and meet you and give you a copy of my album? And could you give this to your Prime Minister with my compliments? And they said, come on over. And I went. They were nice to me. They thanked me for the album, and they said, we'll be in touch if anything's going to come of this. And so a couple of weeks went by, and one of the ambassadors called and said, Prime Minister Gary is coming to New York shortly because he's going to be knighted as Sir Eric Gary in a big ceremony, and he'd like to meet you, and we'd like to invite you to the ceremony. And I said, I would like that. Thank you very much. And I went. It was the first time I'd actually gotten into the United Nations, because my name was on the list at the security desk, finally. And I went. It was wonderful to witness. And when it was all over, they brought me into a room. And a few minutes later, one of the ambassadors brought Sir Eric Gary in, and they left the two of us alone. And I thought, oh, geez, that's kind of bold. Leave me with the leader of your country. But they probably figured, how far could I get if I was going to do something totally weird? And he congratulated me. First, I congratulated on him becoming Sir Eric Gary. And he said he liked my album, the people that were on the album, and he liked my proposal that I had also given his ambassadors about what I would like to do at the UN. I said, Mr. Prime Minister, with all due respect, the UN is not paying attention to you. Neither is the media. If you liked the people on my album, the scientists, the astronauts, military, I could bring some of these people here on your behalf if you will support my idea of a presentation. And a minute or two later, we did a handshake deal. And he said, yes, I'd like to do that. Let's do that. Let's move forward on it. It was that simple. And the next couple of things that happened, I was sent by their office, the Grenada office, my own little, it's about the size of a credit card, my own personal delegates card. So on the top, it's got the United Nations logo, and it says Advisor Lee Speigel for Grenada for the 33rd General Assembly session. And it was like, wow, this got me through the security desk at the UN whenever I needed to go there for meetings with anybody, or if I needed to go through documents. It got me through. The next thing that happened was I started receiving checks from the United National Bank of Grenada. And I'm going, what the hell? We only had a handshake deal. I wasn't on staff with the country. And it turns out that they wanted to pay my expenses when I had to fly around the country for meetings outside of New York and to pay for the gathering of materials. And so this was not just to pay me, it was to take care of my expenses. But I found out months later through a document from the Freedom of Information Act that around this time, the State Department started to keep tabs on what I was doing. The principal, the United States ambassador to the United Nations, was sending regular messages back and forth between him and the Secretary of State in Washington. And there was one document that came to my attention after we actually did our event in November. And this particular document said, Prime Minister is doing deja vu again, UFOs again. Prime Minister Gary, this time, however, is bringing a whole group of experts to the United Nations in November. The group consists of scientists, Alan Hynek, Jacques Vallée, Gordon Cooper. We understand the person who's responsible for bringing these people together is producer Lee Speigel. How do you want us to handle this? Aha. Well, there was a tip-off that they wanted me to be watched. And I only knew that while it was happening when there were sometimes I was home in my apartment in New York, and I would go to pick up the phone, and instead of hearing a dial tone, I could hear breathing, I could hear strange clicks. Oh yeah. And then I would hang it up, and I told personal friends of mine, well, what the hell is this about? They said, well, your phone is being tapped. They're listening in to see what you're going to be talking about. I said, and they said, people said to me, run away from this. Get out of it. Just apologize and tell them you don't want to do this anymore. And I said, no, I'm in it too far. And so one day I was home alone, picked up the phone, no dial tone. And I went like this. All right, listen, guys, the call that I want to make now has nothing to do with UFOs. And so you can take a break for a few minutes. I just want to make I want to make a private phone call right now. And assuming you're taping this, you can come back later and look at the time date and you can see what it is I talked about. But take a break and find me later. And I hung up. And from that point on, there was never a problem. I never heard any clicks, any breathing. They left me alone.
Wow, that's cool. Oh man, I've got so many follow-ups to that, but I've got to move on to.
I know.
Because it's just, to me, it's the best thing you sent me out of everything that you sent, and I just want to refresh it for sort of all of the new folks that are new to this conversation. So real quick, Michael Huntington, if you can give us 5, because I know you can name 5 for a $5 donation. So yeah, there you go, $1 for each one. Lee, who are some of the old school researchers that new students should study and read?
Jacques Vallée, George Knapp from KLAS TV, David Marler. Oh my God, David Marler has.
Talk to David Marler. He's one of my list.
David Marler has the most incredible. He has the world's largest personal collection of archives, and documents. He just acquired the complete Alan Hynek personal documents and Project Blue Book UFO documents that were part of the Center for UFO Studies. And what David had to do was he hired a couple of years ago, he contracted a company that came and put an entirely new wing onto his house in Albuquerque to house this stuff.
Right.
When you walk into it, it's like walking into the main lobby of the New York Public Library. It's vast.
All right, you got two more. You got two more.
Two more names.
Yeah.
Barry Greenwood, who's been working with David to digitize everything in Barry's archives with what's there with David's. I got one more. Oh boy.
Someone in the chat says Kirk Collins.
Well, I'm not sure.
What about Stanton? What about Freeman?
Well, you know what? Yes, at the time when Stan was still with us, he was the best researcher, I thought. And as I understand it, I think all of his files were turned over to, I think, the University of New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, where he was living at the time. So all of his stuff is already taken care of. Yeah. But yeah, certainly Stan in terms of what he had. Yeah.
All right.
There's some really.
You got 5 good ones there, Matthew, right? I feel like you got your $5 donations worth. Okay, so I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off, Lee, but we have to get into this.
I know what you want, and I can. You ready for it?
Yeah, I'm ready for it. Paint the picture for this that I'm about to bring up on screen, so everybody can sort of follow along with us.
Oh yeah, okay.
Oh God, I wanted to be on for this.
Oh, do you have to go, Jazz?
I'm gonna have to.
All right, my friend.
Shortly.
Okay, well, okay. So then let's do this, Jazz. What's your question on this? Because I know you powered through this, so I want you to ask Lee a question. Basically, what this is this is an Air Force training manual. It's chapter 33, it looks like, and it's titled Introductory Space Science, Volume 2, Department of Physics, United States Air Force, Chapter 33, Unidentified Flying Objects, edited by Major Donald G. Carpenter and co-editor Lieutenant Colonel Edward R. Thurkelson.
I appreciate that, Lou. And Lee, I do want to ask you this one question.
Yeah.
I went through and read the highlighted portions that you pointed out for everyone, and I hope everybody goes and reads it.
Yeah.
But the one thing that struck me was a lot of the terminology that we're seeing in there, and this is back when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
And I'm up in Social Security age now. It's really not changed at all, has it? I mean, that's my question. It's like the same answers we were being given back then, the same descriptions. Like, well, here's what needs to be looked at. At least until the last round of congressional activity we've seen going on.
Right.
It's the same language they've been using since I was a teenager.
Yeah.
I mean, is it really not that different?
It's not that different. It's like I say, it's the same language that Nathan Twining was writing in 1947. And people, the passage of time tends to reverse people's memories about things. And so when I was at Hynek's office, we were putting together our press packet that we were going to be giving out to all nations of the world in November of that year. And we were also going to give the press, the media, these same packages. And I said to Alan, I said, we've got a lot of good stuff here, but I would really personally like something that I would consider as a smoking gun in this field. And I said, I have to know, Alan, you were the scientific guy for the Air Force for more than 20 years. You had a high enough clearance. And I got to think that you must have gotten into some rooms where there were filing cabinets and you were able to access things. Do you have anything? And he walked over to his filing cabinet, opened it up, and he pulled out a manila envelope and he handed it to me. And as he did, he said, I don't know if you'll think that this is a smoking gun, but if you like what's in here, I will give you permission and you can make some copies of it. I ended up making a gazillion copies of this thing. and we can give it out later this year at the UN. So I had no idea, and I reach in and pull out this 14-page chapter from Introductory Space Science, and the chapter is a physics book for the cadets at the Air Force Academy. This was not meant for anybody outside of the eyes of cadets, our future Air Force leaders back in 1968. And I started reading through this, and I'm looking at Alan Hynek and going, where did you get this? And are we going to get into trouble if we include this? He said, look, you don't need to know everything about this, but I'll give you permission if you like this. And I said, are you kidding me? And what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to read you some excerpts, okay? Right now,
please,
so your audience can tell we're talking about.
If you want to hang up and listen, or if you want to stick around for another question, please.
I do need to hang up. We're doing a medical procedure.
Thank you, Jazz. Thank you for being here.
Jazz.
Thank you, Lee, for answering my questions.
Oh, certainly. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Sir. We'll see you soon. Thank you again.
So this is. I'm just going to read you a little bit of this. They begin by saying, what we will do here is to present evidence that UFOs are a global phenomenon which may have persisted for many thousands of years. Wow, really? We're telling this to the cadets? UFO sightings not only appear to extend back 47,000 years through time, but also are global in nature. One has the feeling that this phenomenon deserves some sort of valid scientific investigation. Really? Only now are they saying that? With all the current events? Okay, we go on to the next part. The most stimulating theory for us is that the UFOs are material objects either manned or remote controlled by beings who are alien to this planet. There is some evidence supporting this viewpoint. And I'm sitting there reading this going, are they kidding me? What is this? Next section. Why no contact? We may be the object of intensive sociological and psychological study. You do not contact a colony of ants, and humans may seem that way to any aliens. Variation. A zoo is fun to visit, but you don't contact the lizards. Such contact may have already taken place secretly and on a different plane of awareness. The available data leaves us with the unpleasant possibility, and here comes the kicker for me, leaves us with the unpleasant possibility of alien visitors to our planet, or at least of alien-controlled UFOs. What questionable data there are suggests the existence of at least 3 and maybe 4 different groups of aliens, possibly at different stages of development. It implies the existence of intelligent life on a majority of the planets in our solar system, or a surprisingly strong interest in Earth by members of other solar systems. Are you kidding me? This is what they were telling cadets in 1968. And here's the kicker. Between 68 and the end of 69, a couple of things happened. The Air Force came in and revised that chapter. And they made some changes, put it back into the book, and republished it only for the cadets. And then, as we all know, not long after that, suddenly the Air Force decided we need to end Project Blue Book. We've had enough of this. And so all the things that they said about why they're ending Project Blue Book, nothing of any scientific interest, it has nothing to do with our national security, certainly not extraterrestrial. It was all anti what I just read to you that they were telling their cadets. So who do you believe? I mean, really,
Right. No, I'm so curious to know what Rather thought of this, because I laid this on his plate a couple days ago. So Rather, what were your first thoughts when reading this?
Yeah, no, my first thoughts was that this could have been written today, right?
Yes.
Like it literally looks like the UAP task force report, in terms of why no contact, what the possible
well, the descriptions for me is what really is sort of emphasizing what you're saying, because, and let me just read these out really quickly. This is what's in the manual. And by the way, we're gonna upload this to our Discord, so check out the Discord after the show, because we're also going to go there and have a little hour-long post show. But this says description: size, shape, disc, ellipse, football, etc., luminosity, color, number of UFOs, location, altitude, direction, etc., patterns of path, straight line, climbing, zigzagging, etc., flight characteristics, wobbling, fluttering, etc., periodicity of sightings, time duration, curiosity or inquisitiveness, avoidance. Curiosity, inquisitiveness is something that we heard from the Secretary of the Navy, that these things seem curious in what we're doing. And former Secretary of the Navy, we have to make that clear. But avoidance, hostility, the associated effects, electromagnetic, compass, radio ignition systems, radiation, burns, induced radioactivity, ground disturbance, dust stirred up, leaves moved, standing wave, sound, none, hissing, humming, roaring, thunderclaps, vibration, weak, strong, slow, fast, a smell of ozone or other odor, flames, how much, where, when, and what color, smoke or cloud, which this is something we hear often, amount, color, persistence, debris type, amount, color, persistence, inhibition of voluntary movements by observers, sightings of creatures or beings, after effects they put in here of burned areas or animals. This is a full decade before Linda Moulton Howe's Strange Harvest comes out. So this idea of cattle mutilations and burning of animals, this is 10 years before that.
Luis, can I? First of all, the thing that I everything you just read, every single part of this description you just read, it sounds to me that it must either be swamp gas, right, or it must be a weather balloon in 1947, or blah, 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 blah. I mean, really, do any of their, swamp gassy kind of explanations have anything to do like what you just read, right?
Right. No. The answer is no.
No.
and man, when you read this, when you started talking about this the other night on KGRA, I can't remember whose show you were on. I apologize to my fellow KGRA radio hosts, but I was absolutely blown away. And I know there's people probably in the audience, or people who don't like my show primarily, rolling their eyes going, well, how could you not know this, Lou? This has been around for blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, guys, I'm not a historian. I'm not a researcher. And so when I find things like this, I'm like, I get excited because I think that this exact thing we're probably going to see next year.
Yeah,
it's going to be part of this Gillibrand amendment that hopefully gets passed into law, which I think it will. But rather, what were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, it's very exciting because it does seem like it could have been written today, but it's also frustrating in that regard too, because it seems like we should have more evidence.
That's right.
One of the most amazing lines in this was from the conclusion, where it says that we need long, diligent effort of a large group of well-financed, competent scientists to figure out what this is. And it seems like we probably haven't had that until maybe now with the Galileo project and Avi Loeb.
Right. Now, what I would like to say, if there's anyone out in your audience who would like this actual chapter in their hands, if you just shoot me an email, and my email address is the word contact, like that, contact@leespeigel.com. And Spiegel is spelled S-P like Peter, E-I-G-E-L. Just contact@leespeigel.com and just tell me in an email to please send you that Air Force chapter, and I will send it to you for free. I want as many people to see this as possible.
And again, Lee's links are in the description below, so check out his links if you want to get to this. And again, we're going to post this to our Discord, so it'll be there forever for you guys. You can always come back and check this out, because I think this is the closest thing to a smoking gun.
Well, thank you. And can you understand how frustrated it was for me? On November 27th, 1978, we're at the United Nations. All the packets are out there. The nations have it. The media has it. And I just waited, and I waited, and I waited. And nobody made any big deal about this. The media didn't write any stories about it. None of the nations picked up on it. And I waited. And again, this was 1978. It would be a few years further than that before we had something called the internet, where people could just go online and look up stuff all to themselves. I had to make a gazillion copies, and everywhere I went, I told people about this thing. It's not like I said, wait a few years, there'll be a thing here called the internet, and you'll be able to find it by yourself. It's like nobody knew.
Yeah. Rather, what were you going to say, bud?
Well, I have a general question about, like, what do you feel like the stigma is from the 60s and the 70s towards now? Like, was there more stigma in the 70s when you were doing this stuff at the UN, or do you feel like it's increased or decreased since then?
I think that the stigma has decreased. There is far less ridicule now about this stuff. And I remember the days when any kind of a UFO story would be on the news. It would always be relegated to the last 5 minutes of the 11 o'clock news. So they do the news, they would do the weather, the sports, and then coming out of the final commercial, there'd be, hey, Sally, did you hear about the thing that landed in the cattles and the. Well, yeah, Duke, and we don't know what it was, and we don't have any pictures of it. Thanks for tuning in tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
But they don't do it like that anymore.
Well, real quick, Matthew Rye with a $5 donation. Lee needs to meet the Discord. I agree, but I'll be honest with you, I barely just got Discord, so I don't know, Lee. If you need a lesson, I'm definitely not the guy to give it to you. But it's a cool place, and like I said, we're gonna be there after the show, so come hang out. To anyone who's in the chat watching the show. So look. Lee, honestly, man, we could have done this full 2-hour show on just the album.
Wow.
I mean, honestly, I could have just dove into. There were so many things that I wanted to dive into, but we are out of time. And
I appreciate that, and I will tell you that very shortly now, because I'm so proud to say that everything on this album that I did in 1975 is remarkably still relevant today. The voices, the information, and I'm getting ready to re-release the album very shortly.
Yeah. And
the album seems like it could have been recorded yesterday too.
Honestly, I mean, like I didn't even get to the clip of Senator Edward Rausch. So we're gonna get to it next. Lee, you're coming back. I'm sorry that you don't have a choice. You have to come back.
I don't have a choice.
And I'm gonna be bothering you offline to sort of get me into your Rolodex of friends, because I also want to talk to all of them. Mr. Lee Speigel, I cannot thank you enough for the gracious time that you've lent our show.
Thank you for the invitation
and the inspiration that you've put on this community, and letting us, like I said, stand on your shoulders. Honestly, it has been one of the greatest honors of this show to have you on here. I've been dying to talk to you.
Well, thank you.
I cannot appreciate it enough. So please, the floor is yours. You've got about a minute to let everybody know where they can find your stuff and your closing thoughts, and genuinely thank you.
My website is just leespiegel.com, and to send me any information or questions, or if you're interested in that chapter, go to contact@leespiegel.com. And that'll get you right to me, because I go to all those emails. That's only for the folks who are listening to me on shows like this. And does that mean, Luis, that now I can stop calling you at home as often as I have been?
Call me anytime you want. My phone will always get picked up for you, unless, of course, I'm doing a show.
Right.
He called me when I was doing a show. I'm like, oh my God, Lee's calling me. I can't answer the phone. But yeah, anytime, sir. Honestly, I really, really enjoyed the hell out of this.
Thank you, rather. It's good to meet you. It's good to meet Jazz.
Thank you.
All right, sir. We'll see you soon.
All right. Do I have to punch anything to get
No, I'll get you out of here. All right. We'll check you later, Lee Speigel.
Okay. Thank you.
Ciao. Oh my goodness, man, that was so awesome. Okay, we've got a minute. What a guest. We've got a minute to tell everybody about everything we do. You guys, thank you so much for coming aboard and getting weird with us here on another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review. We don't forget, before you get out of here, we've got the podcast. This podcast will be available right after the show on both Spotify, iTunes. We've got the Patreon. Nothing's hidden behind a paywall, so go check out the Patreon. It's a wonderful way to support the show. Thank you so much to all of the super chats. I hope I didn't miss any of them. The stream today, boy, was lag city. Make sure to ring that bell if you haven't subscribed already. Please help us get to 5,000. We're so close. And then we've got links to the merch store and everybody who was on the show today. So go check out the links below. Want to say thank you to Rather. Want to say thank you to Jazz. Want to say thank you to KGRA Radio. Check it out on KGRDB.com. We've got Dan Zetterstrom and Annie McGrillen from That UFO Podcast, who just did their 1 millionth download. Congratulations, you guys. Amazing. milestone. Let's see, I want to say thank you to DOS Tapes. They provide all the tunes you hear on the show. And then, of course, Rather, thank you so much. Is there anything quickly you want to say before you get out of here?
No, happy squidding, and you too, rather be squidding.
Awesome, you guys. Well, thank you so much for being here for another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP, UFO, science, and emerging tech. I'm Luis Jimenez. Until next time, you guys, stay safe out there. Peace.